Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome to episode 43 of Catch and Counter. Here with my guy, as always, my guy Nibs. Nibs, our last show of 2025. Pretty crazy how quickly a year can go, and we get to end the year with Inoue and Nakatani.
You know, no better way to end the year than in the company of good friends and good boxing. Hey, shout out to everybody on YouTube. Shout out to everybody following us on Big Mouth Radio. We appreciate your time fucking with us this entire year. Thank you for putting up with us. You know, you could be fucking with anybody else, but you're fucking with us, and we appreciate you.
Beautifully said, my friend. I say we start with what people are probably most curious about, which is Junto Nakatani getting a win over Hernandez. Really, like, barely getting a win, getting out by the skin of his teeth to keep the possibility of a fight with him and Inoue alive. But what did you think of Junto Nakatani's performance and of Hernandez's performance?
Look, man, this is what real boxing looks like, folks. You know, I know a lot of you were fans of that bullshit that went on, the couple of weeks ago that we did not cover on purpose. But look, this is what real boxing looks like, guys. This is a guy who's coming up, pretty much cleaned out, his division, and then he's moving up for a challenge. And that's exactly what the fuck he got. He fucked around and found out it isn't always sweet for everybody when they move up. And, picking opponents matter, bro. When you're going up a division, I'm not saying you got to do a light touch, but you can go do a little bit lighter than Hernandez. You know what I'm saying? Hernandez was all business. And for those of us who did watch the fight, a lot of people had Hernandez winning. A lot of people had it a draw. Very few people on the outside of the people who count, which are the ones who gave it to Nakatani, had Nakatani winning. I think that just proves not necessarily that Nakatani is falling off or he bit off more than he could chew, but the division is loaded, top to bottom, right? And now you're swimming with the sharks, and he barely got out of there, unscathed, bro.
Well, he started the fight strong, right? And apologies for my missing voice at the moment, but he started the fight strong. Probably won the first 4 or 5 rounds pretty clean. But Hernandez's punch output, his tempo, it was relentless. And it was the first. We were talking about this last night. It was the first time we saw Nakatani look like the smaller guy in the ring, and really wasn't able to land any one shot to change the dynamic of the fight and to give Sebastian Hernandez a reason to stop coming forward. And by the end of the fight, it was really it kind of was Hernandez's fight.
I mean, look, I like guys like Hernandez. They've got one gear, right? But that gear really fucking works for him. You know what I'm saying? It's come forward. It's the Isak Cruz, but with more tools, right? He's going to come at you all night. He's going to be at your chest, and you can throw your entire kitchen at him, not just the sink. You can throw the fridge, the stove, the oven, the microwave, and he's going to keep coming. You know what I'm saying? It's a recipe that's tried and true with Mexican fighters, and that's why they make exciting fights because you have a guy like Nakatani who's knocking people out left and right. He's got skills to pay the bills, and he got in there with a dude who did not get the memo that this was supposed to be a soft touch for Nakatani, and he came in there, and for my money, I thought he won. If we're looking at this by the numbers, Hernandez was 20-0 before the fight, Nakatani 31-0. So on appearances, you think Nakatani's got the better experience. Hernandez doesn't have any world champions on his ledger, but he's got some really serious contenders, that he's kind of mowed through, bro. I mean, 18 knockouts, you know what I'm saying? That says a lot. And, again, when you're looking at the scores, 115, 113 twice, the 118, 110, that's the one, bro. I got to get your idea on, or your thoughts on that. 118, 110 either way to me is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not in reality. I think that's common sense to any boxing fan that sees a close fight like that where both guys have to kind of go to hell and back. Is just not reflective of reality at all. I thought the fight was a draw. I didn't think I thought that a 7-5 card either way was within the realm of reality, but that's about it.
Yeah, the 115, 113s, I wasn't necessarily mad at. I would have, if they were the other way, I definitely would have agreed,
I
but at
think
the
that
same
would have made a
time,
good score too.
but I'm not angry at the 115, 113. The 118, 110, I'm like, okay, you can't tell me that Nakatani clearly won those many rounds. There's depth. I mean, unless you're giving every single toss-up round to Nakatani, there's no way that score works for me, in my opinion. And anyway, you know, hats off to Nakatani. I think and Hernandez both. They're both still relatively young guys. I mean, Hernandez is only 25. Nakatani's still under 30 at 27. I don't know when he turns 28 or when they age up, but relatively young dudes. So I think at this stage in his career, even though he's 31 fights in, I think this is a good time for him to get that test because now he has to realize, okay, if I'm having that much trouble with a guy, that I should be able to walk through, what am I going to do when I get up here, with the monster? Because you're definitely not going to be able to just do the same thing and get away with it. Inoue doesn't allow for that. So, we'll have to see what happens. It makes for an intriguing fight between the two gentlemen from across the seas there.
Before we get into Inoue, I'm trying to kind of figure this out for myself, but what amount of it's always the tough question when we see a superstar fighter struggle. What percentage of it is that Hernandez is a tremendous fighter, which it's very obvious that he is, and what percentage of it is like Nakatani either had an off night or isn't quite an 122 pounder? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you see as because I think pretty much anyone looking at this fight that didn't know a lot about Hernandez probably thought it was another easy night for Nakatani.
I think it's 80-20 Hernandez being that great, being that good. Because I do think that Nakatani took the fight seriously. I don't think he was overlooking Hernandez necessarily. I don't think he was ready for what Hernandez really brought to the table. And let's be really clear, and we talked about this, before coming on. Nakatani landed some clean punches, bro. We talked about this the other day. It wasn't like, he wasn't effective. He landed some clean punches. The problem is when he landed on Hernandez, he walked right through him like they were, like they were nothing. These were punches that were putting other guys down, if not out, right? And this guy walks through them. And you alluded to this, that affects your psyche as a boxer, right? Hold on, wait a minute. I just hit you with a Sunday punch and you walk through that shit.
Yeah,
and then,
usually this changes the tone of the night,
Yeah. So I think that was the biggest, to me, the biggest difference. Nakatani is used to a guy reacting a certain way to his punches. And I don't know if it isn't necessarily the power that didn't come up. I just think Hernandez is one of those guys, bro. And if not, should be challenging for a world title, will be a world champion at some point in the near future. So I think when you're dealing with guys that are young, again, we're talking about 25-year-old guy who's hungry, right? And he's never really going to do the whole, hey, I'll let you get escape so that I can get a payday. No, he's coming in there to be his own Junto Nakatani or Monster Inoue. He wants his name to be on that marquee just as much as you do. So, hey, bro, I think, to be honest with you, for my money, it was way more Hernandez's talent than Nakatani's ineffectiveness.
Well, speaking of young 25-year-old guys, we saw Alan David Picasso, the mandatory to Naoya Inoue. get a full 12 with Inoue, and maybe even have his best round in the final round of the fight, which I think showed a lot of character from him as a young fighter. But for Inoue, yet another dominant performance. He's taking on top-rated guys. He's beating them handily. It's one of the best jabs in the business. It's some of the best footwork in the business. We're watching an all-time great. But how do you assess this performance individually?
Again, just to run it down by the numbers so that everybody understands what we're dealing with here, right? We're not talking about a guy who was 12-0 before he fought anyway. We're talking about a guy who actually had two more fights, I think, than Inoue before they climbed into the ring. He was 32-0-1, right? So, again, even though, like you said, he's a 25-year-old guy. He's a 25-year-old guy with 33 fights on his ledger. In a pretty decent
hard, but
knockout
it's got
rate.
some miles on it.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And against decent competition, we're not, he's got some cab drivers, don't get me wrong, but he's mixed it in very well with some very solid opposition, right? You know what I'm saying? At least at the time that he fought him anyway. And, again, he comes in and you're facing the guy, even though Inoue's 32, 7 years older than him. He comes in and completely dominates him. And I know people are like, oh, well, he didn't get a knockout. That's why I said that in the beginning. We're talking 32-0-1, right? Here's a guy who, again, just like Hernandez, isn't just going to come in and lay down. He's one of those guys too. He thinks he can be a world champion someday. And when you get a guy of that pedigree, they're not just going to come in and lay down every time. You're not going to knock everybody out at the championship level. It's not going to happen, even if you are the monster. You know what I'm saying? But I think, to be honest with you, I think this was actually even a better fight for the monster because, yeah, if you get a knockout, okay, cool. And those are cool, and we all love to see them. But to be able to completely dominate somebody else for 12 rounds, to me, that's way more impressive than just, landing one punch on a guy and getting him out of there.
Well, I think the other thing, too, is the comparison for me with Inoue that I always use is Lomachenko, not necessarily because they fight similarly, but because there's a certain amount of they've cleaned out the lower weight classes and they've had to move up in order to find competition that the fans will find interesting. There was no more interesting competition for Inoue at 115, 118. This is where he's got to fight now. And not long ago, people were just talking about, okay, what if him and Tank fought at 135? That's the standard that this guy gets held to. But the reality of the situation is, fights where he's getting early knockouts at lower weights, those just aren't going to come as easily as you move up in weight. There's certain things about you as a fighter that change as you change weight. But there's also a certain amount of you are who you are. Your body is what it is. Where Lomachenko was laying out Rocky Martinez in the middle of the ring with a right hook, he was getting dropped by Jorge Linares before getting a stoppage to the body. So I think that there's a certain amount of reality that, size matters, and that in a way, while he's an all-time great, is a human being. He's not a superhero. And the concept that he was just going to keep getting first-round knockouts every single time out, it just isn't realistic. You're fighting the best guys at a division, much higher than you fought at, with the exception of the last couple of years. And I think the factor maybe that people aren't thinking of as much, this is fourth fight this year, Nibs. We don't see elite guys into the ring 4 times a year. And by the way, getting 2 knockouts this year out of those 4 wins, and one of those decisions being against MJ Akhmadaliev, who's a tremendous fighter in his own right. But yeah, I just think that maybe Inoue, because he's been so spectacular, gets held to a different standard, maybe even an unfair standard.
It's completely unfair because, again, just what you just said, when you get to the elite level of boxing, right? When we're talking, Canelos, the Terrence Crawfords of the world, in the past, Floyd's, the Pacquiao's, even the heavyweight division, you with the Usyks and the Furies and all that, right? Those guys don't fight more than twice a year, if you're lucky, right? You usually get these guys once, maybe twice a year, and they're spread out. Monster fought 4 times, bro. Like, we should revel in that. The fact that a guy who doesn't have, and by the way, doesn't have to, he doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. There were contenders who aren't fighting 4 times a year. There are prospects that aren't fighting 4 times a year. This guy did it. He did it against the highest level. He went undefeated with 2 knockouts. And and by the way, guys, just so we're clear, in case people think he's losing a step, he didn't get a knockout, but these were legitimate scorecards: 119, 109, 120, 108, 117, 111, and those were real. There was no, oh well, those are scorecards because it's Inoue. Nah, I'm okay with every single one of those scores. I don't have a problem.
Our guy Mark H says 4 fights defending undisputed in a year, 4 different cities too: Tokyo, Vegas, Nagoya, and Riyadh. It was all mandatories if Goodman didn't get cut. I mean, listen, he's not just Japan's champion, he is becoming like the people's champion. And though he's not going to get the same type of notoriety in the States as American fighters like Terrence Crawford or even somebody like Canelo Alvarez, I think that the boxing public is catching on, that this guy really is special.
It's crazy because most people didn't know who he was, and until he fought an American, right? Most people, yeah, and Steve Fulton, yes. But I just say that as a point to say that most people didn't know who he was until he fought an American, and then even those people forgot who he was till he fought in America again. You know what I'm saying? So people forget you here unless you're fighting here, and I think that's one of the biggest disservices, because we've talked about this before. Those Japanese fighters, bro. They're some of the most talented pool of guys, period. The UK guys are definitely coming up way. I mean, there used to be a time frame where you went over to the UK to get easy wins. Now you go over to the UK to get that experience, and you might get your ass whipped. You know what I'm saying? Because the skill level is light years ahead of where it used to be. Now people are afraid to go to Japan and fight these guys, right? Because hey, there's no guarantee I get out of there with my head intact.
I think we're in a golden era of Japanese boxing too, where the regional matchmaking that these guys are coming up on is actually preparing them for world level boxing.
And it's not just the amateur style, right? We used to loathe that all the time, right? The Cubans, they have an amateur style. We would get 2 or 3 superstars out of there that could do it. The Japanese style was purely amateur style. Didn't really translate well to the pros at a certain level. Same thing with the UK style to a certain point. But we'd get a couple of stars here and there. Now it's completely, like you said, it's transformed into, well, we're still going to train you for the the Olympics, but this is how you win overseas, right? And they're starting to I wouldn't say they're starting to, they have surpassed the training levels in the US, and it's not close right now. And if we're not careful, it's going to be hard for us to catch up in a couple of years. But I'll say this, bro. As sad as it might be, I think that even as skillful as Inoue is, I do think he's going to have to fight a tank or a guy with a name before people really start saying, "Oh, okay, he's one of the ones." Other than guys like us.
Well, it seems like the inevitable that he will be fighting Junto Nakatani, which again, I think double booking fights is really dumb. I think it only hurts, what is already an exciting fight. to put two guys on the same card in tough fights and then pick their performances apart, and then ultimately I think people lose some interest in the matchup when the matchup was hot. Now, that being said, I still want to see it. I'm guessing you still want to see it, but what's your degree of interest in that matchup after this card?
It didn't waver for me. And the reason it didn't waver is because I didn't gain or lose anything with Inoue. He, as far as I'm concerned, he's still the guy, right? There's maybe one or two guys in boxing actively that I think have a better skills. I wouldn't even say better, but have a similar skill set to Inoue. And those are first ballot Hall of Famers. Nakatani, he took a little bit of a hit for me. So I do think that he's a little bit more vulnerable, but I actually think that makes this fight even more interesting because I had it pretty even, before this card. Now I'm sitting here going, well, man, hold on, wait a minute. If you're having that many issues with this guy, you're going to be in some trouble, fighting the monster. Because another thing too, we say styles make fights, but they also make weight classes for a reason. Inoue's been fighting at this weight for a little bit longer. He's gotten used to it a little bit more. This is going to be his second time around, and it didn't really go well the last time. So we're going to have to see, if he's ready for what Monster's throwing his way.
Yeah, listen, bro, I think going into this card, I probably even would have not favored, but ever so slightly lean towards Nakatani off of the intangibles, right? Just off of being a younger guy. He's got a bigger frame. Maybe there's more growth potential in terms of his body. Like, I just wasn't sure. And now I think that that's all much more up in the air. And if anyway, I think it makes Inoue probably a favorite. Maybe that puts a little bit of a chip on Nakatani's shoulder. We'll see.
I think the thing about it is I think that win, lose, or draw, Junto is a very disciplined guy. So I think that he's going to be very disciplined in his preparation for Inoue. And if anything, I think that him having a rough fight actually is going to probably make him refocus even more, right? Because he's going to have time. He got a little bit of an injury. Inoue fought 4 times, so Inoue even in his fight said he's looking to rest up. You know what I mean? He had a hell of a 2025. So, we're probably not going to catch this fight until after the first quarter, and, probably well into the second quarter next year if we get it or when we get it. So he'll have some time, to rest up, get a game plan going. And I think he's got a team around him that's going to put him in a position to give the best fight he can. I just think that after what I saw this weekend, I think Inoue is still the guy. And I think he's a level above Nakatani at this point in their careers, even with the age difference.
And to be fair, regardless of everything we've just said, it's the biggest fight in Japanese history and one of the best fights that can be made in all of boxing. And listen, if you as a fan need the qualifier of seeing Nakatani beat Hernandez convincingly, I don't think you're going to get it. I don't think that fight's going to happen again, or a rematch will happen. Definitely not before the fight with Inoue. And I don't think they'll match those two again before the Inoue fight if they know what's good for them and they actually want that fight to happen.
Look, let's be really clear. Nakatani Inoue is the Super Bowl in Japan, right? That's the thing that's going to happen. They might let people off of work for a couple of days.
Right. We in the States can't even really relate to how big of a fight that's going to be over there. Like that fight over there, think about all of the casual sports fans that in your life that were talking about Jake Paul fights. That's what Inoue Nakatani is over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's the biggest spectacle there is. It's not just the biggest fight, but it's the biggest sporting event in Japan, right? Like that's what people have to understand. Nakatani Inoue is the biggest sporting event. boxing has had some very huge nights, right? Even this past year, we've had some really great nights of boxing. You can rarely say, right, that any one boxing event has been the biggest sporting event of the year, because we have a Super Bowl and the NBA finals, right? So those in the World Series, those usually go 1, 2, 3. And then if there's a really super big fight, that usually comes in fourth or third, depending on how bad, the NBA finals are. So, based on how that goes. But at the end of the day, because we have a Super Bowl, everything else gets dwarfed. This is that. This is the Super Bowl, it's the NBA finals, it's the World Series all wrapped up into one. And then you have to understand too, there's a pageantry to what they do over there that we don't get over here, right? There's going to be like a couple of days leading up to this fight of pageantry before they even step inside the ring. So when I tell people, look, they're going to shut down Tokyo for like a couple of days because of this fight.
Well, and I'll tell you what, they're not going to be doing that fight in Riyadh. That's going to be a fucking home game.
No, they would be ridiculous. It would be ridiculous to do that anywhere other than Tokyo.
And those fans deserve it, man. I talk about support local boxing. Those are the fans that deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, they show up. It's weird because I've watched a lot of these overseas fights. They definitely watch the sport live different than we do.
Yeah.
Like, there'll be a lot of silence.
I fuck with it though, bro.
Yeah.
I kind of fuck with it. Like, there's a respectfulness to the danger of what's happening. But then when something exciting happens, they clap, they cheer, but they don't. There's no like booing the guy that's from the Philippines or like, you know what I mean. There's a not just a respect to the sport, but to the athletes that's presented in Japan that it's really grown on me.
They're very high on the respect either way, right? Like, they want you to respect them and their customs, but they're going to respect you. Win, lose, or draw, you know what I'm saying? And I do fuck with that. It's just, being an American sports fan, it is different, right? You don't, like you said, you don't get the booing, you don't get a lot of in between action ruckus. You get the big punch, the knockdown, you get that. But other than that, no, they're sitting there chilling, hella respectful. You know what I'm saying? You hear the commentators really clearly, but you know what I actually like about that is you get to hear and see the punches much more cleaner and crisper with these foreign fights, because there isn't a lot of background noise to compete with. So when Inoue lands a punch, bro, you hear it, see it way better than if he was fighting in Vegas, because there's a million things going on in the background, that affect that. So to be honest with you, I wasn't saying it as a knock. I was like, yo, this is actually, we need to be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can hear all the grunts and everything. Like, you hear these guys going through it. There was a fight I was watching, and this kid got hit with a vicious body punch, bro. You can hear his grunt so loudly because of the deafening silence in the ring. And then when he goes down, the place erupts. But you could hear the pain, and it was just like, oh yeah, I love that.
Well, it was a tremendous way to end 2025, which has been, I would say, a strange year for boxing. Obviously, we've had some great fights, and the fighters are the ones that give us that. But the world of boxing is definitely in a transitional time, where I think some of the things we've known as fans are less certain than ever. And right at this moment, as we speak, we are still in 2025, but the next major card to happen will be in 2026. It'll be Amanda Serrano coming back, taking on a fighter named Reina Tejas after Erica Cruz. The rematch with Erica Cruz was canceled due to an adverse finding. I don't know enough about the situation to speak on it further than that. But what are you looking to see from the great Amanda Serrano at 37 years old on the other side of the Katie Taylor rivalry?
Look, man, I've been on record as saying I thought she won the first two Katie Taylor fights, and I'm not backing down on that. I think she clearly lost the third one. But what I will say is that no matter what the official results were or what your feelings on either fight was, if you watched all three fights, you have to admit those are probably three of the best fights you're going to get in female boxing, if not boxing, period, in a long time. So, hats off to Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, one, for giving us that series that we all appreciate. But I think this is if I were in Amanda Serrano's corner, or if I were herself, I would say this is the victory tour. This is the victory lap. This is the time for you to kind of just go out, fight the fight you want to fight. Fight the way you want to fight at your more natural weight class. Because let's not forget, she's fought in damn near every weight class there is, south of middleweight. Which is crazy when you think about it. The scale, no pun intended, that she's had to fight under as a champion, and only have 4 losses, bro. We're talking about 47-4-1 as a champion, fighting all those different weight classes. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. And to answer your question, I think Tellez is a great fighter. I think she's undefeated. She's hungry, but Amanda Serrano is Amanda Serrano, bro. And I think she's going to come in. She's going to do her job. It might not be as explosive as we're once used to, because she is getting up there in age. I do think the miles are starting to catch up to her, but I think she's still got enough in the tank to go out with a bang.
I think that there's no way the mileage isn't catching up to her, right? But I think that there's still a great fighter there. My concern, I guess, is the ring. Is she still at a certain age? There's certain fighters, right? If they fight really physical, it's not even necessarily that the skill set is gone, but the mentality that it took to win in that way changes. And whether it's the headbutts in the second Taylor fight, or it was how wide the third Taylor fight was, I guess I'm curious to see what version of her do we get? Do we still get a relatively prime Amanda Serrano? Do we get an Amanda Serrano who's on, the other side of her prime, but is still one of the greats? Or are we looking at somebody who is as close to wrapping it up as we've seen her? You know what I mean? And when we talk about greats like Amanda's, I'm of the mindset of protect Amanda. I don't want to see her get hurt. I want to see her be able to talk, to us as fans when she retires. You know what I mean?
I think that I don't think she's in any fear of being there yet, right? I think, I don't think she's on the level of a Hardy yet, right? Where we should be afraid that her motor skills are slipping in any way. Heather Hardy, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, but I don't think she's in that realm yet. I don't think she's in a James Toney realm yet, where it might take you a second to understand what she's saying, even though she's still there, got cognitive skills and all that. And that's not a knock on James, but let's be clear, his speech is definitely slurred quite a bit over the years. Even though I still think he's probably one of the greatest boxing minds, as our generation is, and could probably forgot more boxing than I'll ever even try to remember. I don't think we're there with her at all. And I think that's partly due to the fact that she is a female fighter and she hasn't taken a lot of punishment, bro. You've never seen an Amanda Serrano fight, even in her 4 losses, where you're like, she got beat the fuck up. You know what I'm
I think
saying?
she's had physical fights, but so many of her fights were one-sided that
Right.
it's, aside from the Taylor fight, I mean, that first Erica Cruz fight was pretty brutal. She's had some tough fights, but again, she
Right.
has spent a large part of her career being dominant.
And here's another thing too, right? You have these female fighters, and I fighters in general, but you have these female fighters who were up until 4 or 5 years ago, were doing it damn near for free. Some of them, you know what I'm saying? And she was doing that for a large part of her career. So I think that now with her doing as many fights as that's another thing too. Amanda Serrano fights a lot, bro. You know what I mean? For somebody who's been in it as long as she has. But part of me is like, well, I'm not really that mad at it because she is one of the reasons. Her, Katie, Clarissa, Michaela, AB, they're part of the reason we're watching female boxing nowadays, especially her and Katie. You know what I'm saying? Without that big fight that they had at MSG, most people aren't even watching female boxing. So the fact that she's now getting this platform and now starting to make these bigger dollars, I'm not mad at her doing it probably a little bit longer than she should because I know, how
Right, she has to make
far
up for lost
financially.
time.
Right. I mean, and come on, bro. You know, to be doing it that long at that high of a level and just now starting to get paid, like a lot of these girls, like the Katie Taylors, the Michaela Mayers, Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields doesn't know nothing but money. She's been making money her whole career. Amanda Serrano just started making money. you know, so I think that for me, I'm not as mad at it because I know where that money, used to be, what it used to be, and what it is now. So I'm kind of cool with it, but I would hope that maybe in the next 2 or 3 fights, she's hanging it up.
Well, Nibs, that is a wrap for us in 2025. And it has been a hell of a year for us at ITRBoxing. I could say for me personally, being able to work with my good friend Deja Green again this year, getting to put out episodes of The Fight Life with Price Taylor and Mio Yoshida, all of which you can go watch on our YouTube channel now. It's been a hell of a year. It's been always a pleasure co-hosting with you, my friend.
Likewise.
And we will be back for a special New Year's Day episode where we will present our 2025 year-end awards, and we hope that you join us for that. Nibs, for the final time in 2025, tell us why it's so important for the fans to support local boxing.
Look, man, we've talked about it all year. We talked about it before that, in the previous incarnation of this show, where this actually started. I'll leave you again with a famous quote from another famous boxer. I'll let you guys figure out who. Thank you to every person who has told me I can't. You are just another reason I will. And I think that in boxing, there are a lot of people who told us we couldn't do a successful show. There are a lot of people who will tell you that you can't do anything, but listen to the people that will. When you have support from your local town, the guy who runs the baker shop, the guy who cleans the arena at night when you get done fighting in that shithole place, for the 13th time, who tells you that you can, right? Listen to those people. Don't listen to the haters. Haters are natural. For whatever reason, people like to tell people no, right? But listen to those local supporting guys who show up, day in, day out, who are there every day telling you you can do it. And yes, that was Mayweather. Thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. But it's that, right? Again, people forget these big name guys, they all started pretty close to being broke, unless you've got a father or a person who came before you who was doing it. And even with Mayweather, he came from a fighting family. He came from sleeping 8 persons to a room. Now he's got 8 rooms just for his clothes. So look, at the end of the day, don't pay attention to the people that are telling you no. Pay attention to the people that are telling you yes. And those are usually the people from your hometown that love you just because.
Beautifully said, my friend. Mark, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everybody in our chat all year. The third host is always greatly appreciated. And we will see you New Year's Day. Hope you join us. Peace, guys.